All right, awesome. Mariana, also before we begin, can you go ahead and mute the main college account that's visible? There you go, perfect. Yeah, I can see them setting up. Very cool. Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. I'm not totally sure if we're visible in the college, but it looks like they're working hard on it. So Rick, again, thanks so much for taking time, busy schedule to come spend some time with us. For those of you who do not know, this is part of a design lecture series that we have as part of IDSA, the Houston chapter, where we bring professionals who were either somehow from Houston or crossed paths here, and now are working professionally in the design industry abroad. So we are super lucky to have Rick with us here. And again, Rick is a UHID alumni, class of 2012. So he is representing the Cougs. He is in the house. And he has since become a professional automotive designer and entrepreneur, now with 10 years of experience, developing really just a wide range of vehicles, everything from high-end supercars to EVs, even air taxis. And specifically, he's worked at Lamborghini Design Center, Series EV, Kitty Hawk, 7X Design. Rick has designed both exterior and interior vehicles and really has accumulated just an extensive experience in the R&D process of those fields. His expertise in the automotive industry has brought him great insight into these processes and best practices in automotive and vehicle design. So with that being said, Rick, please take it away.
Cool, thank you for the introduction. That was very nice. It's been fast. It's been 10 years now since I graduated, and it's gone really quick. And I actually really enjoyed making this presentation because it gave me time to kind of stop and look back at some of the stuff I've done and everything I know and what I can offer. So nonetheless, let's get right to it. So a quick recap on some of the stuff that I've worked on. As you mentioned, the Series SF7. These are some of the projects I was so fortunate enough to work on. Again, these are team projects. These are not my projects, they're team projects. The upcoming Lamborghini, the 2023, I got to work on that back in 2013, which is insane to think about. The 7X Design Rayo, the Kitty Hawk Flyer, and most recently I started my own thing with the NFTs with the Rare Breeds project. And then my most recent creation is Remington Ricardo Salinas. So I'm working on that one still, but it's going pretty good. So let's get right to it. Why making it look electric is a bad idea. So before I get into the EVs and what, the proper way, or I guess my way of designing an EV, I want to go back in time so we can understand how we got here, right? So if we go back to the 90s with the GM EV1, this was the first time in modern times, an electric car came out. And as you can tell, very jelly bean. They were focused very much on aerodynamics and wanted to get as much range as you could at the time. Now, again, this is the 90s. Well, it was a huge success. People loved it. Those who owned it swore by it and loved it so much. It was so successful in the fact that the oil tycoons of the world weren't so happy that the electric car was doing great. And they actually ordered GM to destroy all of them. So as you can tell, all the GM EV1 owners were shook, including Mr. DeVito here, who was actually one of the owners. If you want to learn more about this, I highly suggest watching Who Killed the Electric Car. Excellent documentary that kind of brings you up to speed on the electric car today. So if we go a little further in time, and we go now to the 2000s, we have essentially two options. We have the awesome Tesla Roadster, which is a nice sporty electric car. And then you have the beautiful, gorgeous, award-winning Nissan Leaf. And again, we're going to the jelly bean style here again. Now, the drawback of this is that the Tesla, though it's beautiful and it's based off of Lotus and so on and so forth, it's a fun electric car, it's a little bit out of price range for the masses, right? So the car that would be available to the masses, again, would be the Nissan Leaf. So as a result, the Nissan Leaf became the trend leader for EVs. So what do I mean by that? As soon as this car was released, all the other car companies were like, you know what, we need to jump on this EV thing. You know, these guys are doing it over there. It's going pretty good. You know, Tesla's doing their thing. So everyone's like, okay, cool. Let's start pumping out EVs. So what did everyone start doing? Blue badges. We need blue badges on anything that's EV. That way people know this car is electric and not gas, right? Then the next thing they do is, okay, cool. Now we need fake grills because, you know, we no longer need a regular grill because we don't need all this air coming into the engine, internal combustion engine. So let's just put a fake grill, right? And that's how people know it's EV, right? And some people go, you know what, let's take it a step further. Let's do fake grills and blue lights. Now we're super electric, right? But at the end of the day, EV is not a look, it's a function. So the question is, who's winning in this race? And obviously, at the time, I would say Tesla's winning. And as if you can tell here, there's no blue lights, there's no blue badges. It has a regular grill, a grillless, I should say, no typical grill before. And it's just a great, really well-designed, really well-proportioned car. And oh, it just so happens to be EV, right? This is why this car is done really well. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, well, if you go back and look at the first Model S, it had a fake grill. And yes, you're correct. And at the time, if they would have released that car with no grill, it would have been a little bit too off-putting for the mass adoption. So they used the Maya principle, which is the most advanced yet acceptable. So at the time, this worked to kind of bring people on board into EV. Now, obviously, after that, Tesla was like, you know what? I think it's time we move on. Let's bring in the new front end, right? And the grillless was born. And now this is obviously maintained throughout the lineup and it's doing really well, right? So let's jump on interiors now. Well, if you're going to go interiors, you got to throw screens in there. If you want to be electric, you got to throw screens. I want screens everywhere. I don't even want to see the outside. Guys, you don't need screens everywhere to be electric, right? Tesla, once again, proved that all you need is one screen for the entire vehicle, and it doesn't have to be massive. And it was very successful. This is still one of my favorite interiors because I think it just does a great job as what they were trying to achieve in terms of cost, in terms of minimalism, in terms of being futuristic, modern. It just does such a good job. And again, one screen. So the lesson here is don't always follow trend, but what you should do is follow package and purpose. So what do I mean by that? I'm gonna give you an example of one of my favorite cars of all time that does an excellent job of following package and purpose. And that's the Lamborghini Countach. So this car obviously is iconic. Most of you have seen this car. But what this car does so well, besides being absolutely gorgeous, is package this gigantic V12 engine and 2 passengers extremely well. I mean, you can see from this X-ray shot from the 0Y line, there's pretty much no room in this thing. They packed it so good that the outcome was this really short, wedge-shaped, low-profile exotic car, and it was extremely successful. So now as we move to the EV package, things look a little different now. And this is a great thing because now you don't have this gigantic engine that takes up all this space, right? So the EV package, you should look at it as an opportunity to do more with the vehicle than you could ever do before, right? In a way, it presents multiple different purposes where you can have the same platform and do different types of vehicles. Now, this hasn't come mainstream yet, but trust me, I'm pretty sure some of the major OEMs are working on modular platforms so they can achieve something like this. So the question you ask yourself as you guys go forward in y'all's project is, okay, in 5 to 10 years time, what kind of cars will be relevant as we approach the age of autonomous cars, right? Because everyone thinks, oh, we're gonna go autonomous and that's just gonna be it. No, it's not. That's not the way it's going to work. In my opinion, the cars that will definitely survive the autonomous age as we approach it will be the SUVs for families. As you can see, I mean, Ferrari just came out with an SUV, Lotus came out with an SUV. SUVs are going nuts right now. Everybody loves SUVs because it's the family vehicle of choice. If you want to go to the autonomous route, you're going to start seeing robo-taxis come out, right? Like the Zoox, where it's 100% autonomous, and kind of this will be essentially your Uber in the future, right? The truck will also remain relevant simply because the truck is a workhorse. It's used for jobs. So you will definitely see the truck still going around in the autonomous age. And the sports car, my favorite, obviously, but everyone, even if you have an autonomous car, there's going to be still people who love to drive. And those people need a car. And that's where the sports car comes in. So the sports car will definitely survive. So based on whatever you choose, let's say you choose the SUV, you definitely want to look at more like family, adventure focus, looking at like luggage and looking at different seating arrangements, how the family can interact within the vehicle. That's very important in an SUV. If you go the robo-taxi route, then you can focus more like on a lounge type of environment, something that's, you're not there for a long time, but you're there for a little bit, and you're going to have a good time while you're there, right? It's a very lounge, very comfortable environment to get you from A to B. If you focus on the sports cars, then you're going to go very, very driver-centric. So everything is focused on the driver, and everything else is secondary, right? And of course, if you do the truck, then you have to focus a lot on utility. This, I would say, is probably the most difficult one because people expect a lot of utility out of these vehicles. So a lot of different functionalities that these vehicles can do. And with the EV, those functionalities are even more. You can do a lot more with them. For example, the Rivian has this really cool pocket right in the bed of the truck there. And also the Tesla truck, the Cybertruck has some storage underneath the bed itself. So a lot more opportunities now with trucks and EV. So now that you have your package and now you have your purpose, once you figure that out, the next question you have to ask yourself is, okay, what's going to be the design brand DNA, right? What's going to be the design language you choose going forward? Essentially, you're asking yourself, what is the vibe? What am I going for here? I'm gonna give you some examples on exterior on how they're different, but everyone does it successfully in their own way. For example, the first one here is the Dacia, which is very much like a product design feel. It doesn't have the typical, automotive curves. It's more leaning on the product design. And this is actually becoming more and more popular. You have the Hyundai Ioniq, which is more of a faceted, techie kind of vibe, which I think is really brilliantly done. You have the sharp silky of the Infinity concepts that they came out a few years back, very modern, very new. And then you have like the fun minimal style of this Honda. Again, all these are EV, and they all approached it in an EV methodology, and I think it's working really well. A pro tip, if you're doing exteriors, focus on the DRL. This is the daytime running light. This is something that is paramount in establishing a DNA for your brand. This is something companies focus on a lot, is the DRL signature. Because once you have a DRL signature, the idea is that if a car is approaching you from the back, you look in the rearview mirror, you can already tell what kind of car it is. That's the beauty of the DRL, very important. Now, let's go into interiors. What's the vibe there? You can go with real plush luxury like this Mercedes, the Maybachs. You can go with a modern lounge look like the Renaults, cyber tech, or you can do a very clean minimal style like the Polestar does. Again, all different styles, all EV, all really well executed. A pro tip on interiors: to really drive the DNA home, focus on combining vibe with CMF. So CMF is color, material, and finish. And as you can see, the CMF on these vehicles is amazing. And it really, really elevates the design, brings out a whole new aesthetic to it. So at the end of the day, when you design the DNA, there's no right or wrong answer. It really just comes down to taste. So just have fun with it, explore, and really just do what you think is right. So now I'm going to go into the actual design process. The design process is actually very similar to industrial design, but the best way I can explain the design process in automotive that I've seen is we kind of follow this general rule: the 100, the 10 foot, the 1 foot, and the 1 inch. This is basically how you start designing the car. What I mean by that is this: on exteriors, the 100 foot away, like what would the car look like if it was 100 feet away, right? So these sketches are very loose, very dirty, very quick. You're essentially just trying to figure out like, what is the shape I'm trying to go for? what's kind of the theme I want for this vehicle. And again, very, very loose, very dirty. Then once you have something you like, then you kind of go into your 10-foot away, right? Now you're looking at, okay, what does the shadows look like? What do the reflections look like? Like, what's the surface doing along the body side? How does that surface transition into the front? How does the rear transition into the side? Things like this. Focusing on different views and focusing on proportions and the surfacing. Then once you have something you like there, you can start focusing on detail stuff. So you're 1 foot away, right? And you can really start to look at, okay, well, now what I want the tail lights to look like, what's the detail of the tail lights? And you can really kind of do variations on that, and that'll change the look of the vehicle on its own. So you can spend time on this too. And finally, once you have all those things ironed out, then you kind of go into the micro details, right? Now you're looking at like fillets, cut lines, radiuses. This is it takes a long time to get to this part, but nonetheless is a very important part. And honestly, this part takes a lot of time when trying to bring a car into production. Finally, once you have all these things done and the car is fully designed, then you can do the press sketches. And I love these sketches because when I was in school, I saw these sketches and in my assumption, I was like, man, they sketched this car so perfectly. And then they went and started designing it, right? And this is not the case. This sketch was done after all that was designed. So after the whole car has gone through the whole design process, you have the 3D CAD, the modeling and all that, then they produce these sketches as the press sketches because these are the ones that get the most momentum. So again, don't see these and go, oh man, that's so good. I don't know if I can get there. You'll get there. This is essentially drawn over CAD. So totally achievable. If we go on interiors now, interiors start a little different. You definitely still the 110, all that, bringing it down to focus. But essentially, the big thing that drives the interior is the IP. And the IP is the instrument panel. And so most of the sketches for interior start off like this, very, very rough. Looking at the IP, what is the IP doing? What's the overall shape? What's the theme you're going for? Then once you got something that you're kind of liking, you go a little bit higher fidelity sketch, go into different views, and you start adding your shading and different color patching and things like that. And you start to really understand, okay, what's actually kind of happening here, right? And once you have something you like, then you can go into changing up the views, looking at it from different viewpoints, and also adding variation to the design. So like, okay, I want 2 screens, or I want 1 screen, or I want 1 panorama screen, or I want the IP to do something different, or come up, or go around the passenger, however you want to do it. Once you have that, then you go a little more focused and you start looking at the components of the interior. And so you look at, okay, like what are the AC vents going to look like, right? What's my steering wheel going to look like, right? What are some of the buttons? What is the CMF going to look like? What are the colors, material, and finish I'm thinking about, and where can I place those? And you can really nerd out on these kind of stuff. You can get really detailed in the buttons and just looking at how the volume knob looks, the button placement, handles. You can go really, really detailed. Same thing with steering wheel. Steering wheel, we have tons of steering wheel concepts until you finally narrow it down to the final one. But again, you go in and you treat it the same. You start off very general, and then you start focusing on details like buttons and so on and so forth. Finally, once you have all these components, you can finally kind of put them all together like a puzzle, and you have like this complete interior, right? So this is like the goal, right? So this sketch was obviously drawn after they've kind of had all these things in place, and then they kind of put them all together. And then from here, you can start to understand, okay, what's working, what's not, what is, or is everything talking to each other? Does the door intersect the IP in a good way? What's that interaction like? What's the center console intersection with the IP? What's that look like? What do my seats look like? Do they have the same design language? Things like that. Then you can switch it up and go into like more detailed renderings, and where you really start to see it, right? Now this is exciting because now you're like, okay, cool. This is really close to what it's going to look like. And these sketches are really good to go back and forth with CAD, and you can really start to understand how this is going to happen at the end of the day, right? So once you have all this done, and again, you go through the modeling process of CAD and clay and all these things. I haven't mentioned CAD and clay, but definitely is part of the process. Then again, you go into your press sketches. So this sketch here was most likely done after the fact, after everything's been designed. They go over CAD, do some overlays, and you get this super awesome sketch, right? Again, press sketches, these drive a lot of hype. So to recap on those two things, if you're focusing on exterior, start off with looking at the shapes, the forms, then go into your surfacing proportions. then go into your components, your wheels, your tail lights, your mirrors, then finally the fine details, right? Your fillets, your radiuses, and things of stuff like this. In the interior, you start off with your assemblies. You start off with your IP, maybe a door, and then let that kind of drive the design, or maybe even the seats. Then you go into your components, handles, steering wheel, shift knobs, things like this. Then you go into your fine details, right? What does the button placement look like? What's the push button look like? Then finally, you put it all together like a puzzle piece, and you have a full interior, and you kind of reiterate until everything kind of talks, and you have a cohesive design. So at the end of the day, don't follow trend. The idea is to create trend. That's the sweet spot. So before I finish up, I want to give you guys some tips and tricks, because I just went over like a general design process, but I want to give you guys some tips and tricks that I think were really helpful to me as I learned through my 10 years of work here. Number one, use millimeters. Do not even step foot, pun intended, with inches or feet or things like this. It's going to drive you insane. Everyone in the automotive industry all over the world uses millimeters. This is just standard practice. And the more you understand millimeters and size and things like that, it's going to just help you so much more going forward. So definitely understand millimeters and go with that. Secondly, it's okay to do underlays. You know, people see these sketches and they go, oh man, that's such a nice sketch. I really wish I could sketch like that one day. You can. It just takes time and practice. But there's no reason you can't use it as an underlay. Okay, now I'm not saying copy the design. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying use it as an underlay so you can understand, you know, you can get your proportions correctly, right? So if you have let's say you want to design a car that has similar proportions to this Ferrari, you just use it as an underlay, design over it, throw your design on top, and hopefully your proportions stay intact and you have a really good sketch, right? In this case, Ferrari literally used a sketch from a previous Ferrari model to come up with one of their one-off variants. As you can see, it's literally the exact same sketch, overlaid, change the design, new car. Totally okay. Again, you're not copying, you're just using it as an underlay to guide you in the sketch. This is very helpful for me when I was used to doing supercars and then I had to jump on an SUV. My proportions were completely out of whack. It was so bad. When I finally started doing overlays, I finally trained my hand on how to design or how to sketch SUVs proportionally correct. The next tip and trick is Blender right now is the plug. I am obviously pretty much always on Instagram looking at car design stuff, but the people that are coming out here with these models in like 2 days using Blender is amazing to me, because I use Alias, which is the industry standard for automotive design, but Alias is more geared towards like, you can do concept stuff on there too, but it's definitely the go-to for like going into production, right? Manufacturing and getting it super precise and super detailed and really tuning in the highlights. Blender's not that person, but Blender is definitely good for really quick iterations, really quick designs that you can see in 3D right away. So I personally do not use Blender, but I would recommend it just from what I've seen other people use this tool, and I think it's fantastic. And oh, by the way, it's free. Can't go wrong with that. The next thing is proportions are godlike. So this is something that car designers, man, they love talking about proportions. This is like, people really nerd out about this kind of stuff. So here we have exactly the same car, except I modified the proportions a bit. So on the bottom, I tucked the front overhang a little bit, extended the rear overhang, and I messed with the DLO, which is essentially the side windscreen, I guess. And you can see it kind of changes the vibe of the vehicle. The top one looks a lot more tight, it looks very planted. The back one looks very back heavy, looks like the butt's really, really long. It just doesn't feel right. Again, the design essentially is the same, but the proportions are different. And this is how important proportions are, because you can just change a few things here and there like I did, completely changes the vibe of the car. So definitely proportions are king. The other thing is focus on multi-view cohesiveness. So a lot of times people love drawing side sketches on cars. They just sit there and draw side sketches all day. Or they'll just sit there and draw like straight on like front views all day, right? But then as soon as they go into like 3/4 view, rear quarter, it falls apart. The design falls apart. And it's very important that you start to sketch into different views so that you can understand how the design is wrapping around. Because at the end of the day, the car is in motion. So this is not an object you see only in this view. You see it in every view. So the car needs to look good from every angle. So in order for you to make sure you have a good cohesive design, it is critical you design in multiple different views. These 5 views here are like the standard, but there's definitely other views people use, but these are kind of like the typical go-to. Finally, don't get so hung up on, man, I got to be good at sketching, and I got to be good at modeling, and then I got to do play, and then I got to do CMF. But you don't need to do all these things exceptionally well. You just need to do one of them really well, because in car design, each one of these things is a separate team. Literally multiple people doing sketching, multiple people doing modeling, multiple people doing the 3D alias, and then you got a CMF team. So I think that what you should do in this project is kind of focus on what you like. If you really want to try clay modeling, or you really want to try 3D modeling, partner up with someone who loves sketching, right? Come together and y'all have a great team. Or someone's like, hey, I really want to do CMF. Partner with them if you like sketching, right? Make sure your team is kind of diverse in this. If y'all are working in teams, I'm not sure how the project is set up. But again, this is a great time to highlight one of those skills. Don't focus on being good at all of them. And finally, guys, I want to leave y'all with some resources that are really helpful to me, and they're just great to go look at and for inspiration, different things in anything automotive design. I would highly suggest you screenshot this if you can, because I use all of these all the time, especially Net Car Show. Net Car Show is like the best site for going and looking at the recent cars, and sometimes they have nice all the sketches and things like that. So definitely screenshot this, go to those resources. They're very, very helpful. And that is it for me. I really hope I didn't go too fast. I know this is a lot of information to relay to you guys, but please, if y'all have any, I'm here for another 20 minutes for Q&A. So I'm open for questions, but if there's something y'all forget or y'all want to ask later, hit me up on Instagram. I'm always available. I have TikTok. And if you want to see my latest project with the NFTs, you can check out the rarebreeze.io. And that is it for me. So I'll open it up for Q&A. And again, thank you guys.
Yeah, awesome, Rick. Thank you so much for that insight. It was amazing. I specifically love the 110 and 1-1 strategy or approach. I think that's killer. So like Rick said, we're going to open it up to some Q&A. Now, I know some of us are in groups. I'm not really sure how you guys can work that out, but if you want to write your questions in the chat, if you don't have like a microphone available to you, or if you're just brave and you want to speak up, then please, by all means, we'll give the floor to the audience. Hey, Rick, well, while we're waiting, hey, there we go. So Sergio here on the chat is asking, what inspires you today?
Great question. So right now, as I've been tackling this new project, and it's actually not just now, it's actually been a while. I love animals. I think animals are so cool in the fact that they all have, similar to humans, they all have 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth, but yet they all look distinctively different. And so I always thought animals were so cool, and I was very inspired by them, and I try to kind of mimic animals when I do some of the designs I do. And yeah, that's I would say that's my biggest one is literally animals.
Awesome. While we're waiting for more questions, I'll be a little selfish here, Rick, and ask you this idea of a package and purpose. Do you mind sort of re-explaining package as opposed to like what's the difference? Just because I understood package as maybe like a hardware platform. Did I get that about right?
No, so package in automotive design is essentially your internals, right? Let's just say you're designing like a hairdresser, or not hairdresser, a hair dryer, right? And you need to understand the internals of the hair dryer, right? You have the, your motor, you have your circuit board, your wire, and all that stuff. Essentially, the package is that for automotive. So you have your battery pack, your drivetrain, you have your seats, the seating position of the passengers, you have your volumes of cargo. This is your package, right? Once we have, this is essentially presented to us by the engineering team, and they give us like maximum height, maximum width, and again, the layout of the passengers, and then we essentially design over that, right? Now, I know a lot of people have probably seen some of these sketches that look really cool, and then they make the windscreen like super shrunk and the wheels are massive. And you could say, oh, that's not sketch to package. And you're correct, it's not. Because sometimes early in the design process, the whole idea of the sketch is to get buy-in from higher ups. And when you sketch to package super precise, it's not as sexy. It's very difficult to sell. So that's why they've used these tricks where you make your wheels bigger, you shrink your DLO and things like this. You use really extreme proportions and you essentially design out of package. But again, it's just to get buy-in. And then once you have buy-in, then you adjust the design, adjust the sketches to fit the package. And that's the true test. Sometimes the sketches look fantastic and then you sketch to package and it falls apart. So it's definitely a very important part of the design process is following the package.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I have a question. So right now we are designing a car. So it's a semester-long project.
Okay.
I think we are halfway. So we need to create a design that's realistic within 3 to 5 years, but also it's a lot of us, it's our first time designing a car.
Yep.
You approach that yourself too. How would you do to make a design that's unique, exciting, but also within reach, I guess?
Well, that's a good question, because I think a lot of times, myself included, we get hung up on how do we make it real, right? And that's a very important part, don't get me wrong. But a lot of projects that I've had, especially, and I think this kind of relates to what you guys are doing. It's the point of the project is not so much to design a car of today, it's designing a car of tomorrow, right? And essentially what your project will most likely be used, from my understanding, you guys have a sponsorship project with another company. They're gonna probably use one of those sketches to get buy-in from outsiders for investment, right? So when that happens, you don't need to focus on making it 100% real, because again, you're trying to get buy-in from everyone. So going back to, like I said earlier, making those sexy sketches and, focus on like the presentation of the idea, not so much the super details. And kind of, going back to the Maya principle, most advanced yet acceptable, right? For example, the Tesla Model 3 interior, when that came out, that was a perfect Maya situation. Everyone was like, oh my God, there's no cluster in front of the steering wheel. Everyone was freaking out. There was like, oh my God, there's just a screen just floating. People were like, it's like so new, but it was advanced, but accepted. So I think that's kind of the Maya principle is absolutely critical when you're designing something in the future, because you can easily go really future. But then you got to kind of bring it back to the most advanced yet acceptable principle. And I think if you can achieve that, then you're in a good spot.
So kind of staying the 10 feet away type that you presented, or 1 feet away?
No, that's for the design process. You can choose the car. Like if I did a futuristic car, let's just say I did a car with that floats, right? Like Back to the Future. I would still follow the 10, the 100, the 10, the 1-1. I would still do the same thing. Just so happens the car floats, right? Now that's being super future, but I'm still following the same principle of the 10 or the 100, the 10, and the 1-1. So that's just a design process you can use. But it's really up to you, like how far you want to push the car. So essentially, what's the concept about, and how futuristic is it? And if it's too much, too far, bring it back, right? Let's say like hovering, like a hover car, probably too far, right? You might want to dial it back. And the other thing is, in design school, I fall victim to this too. The biggest problem is everyone tries to solve everything. And you don't need to solve everything. The car just needs to do one thing really well, right? Going back to the Lamborghini Countach. The Lamborghini Countach just wanted a huge V12 with 2 passengers, and we wanted this really cool wedge shape. And that was it. The car is very difficult to drive. It's very difficult to get in and out the car. It has very poor visibility. I mean, overall, it's just not that great in terms of it solved all these problems, but it did one thing really well. It created a super iconic, beautiful car that everyone would love to drive, even if it is uncomfortable. So don't focus on trying to solve everything. try to focus on what it is you're trying to get out of this vehicle, and push that, and kind of let that lead the design process.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. We have a question from chat. This one is from Zach. Zach is asking, what helped you the most to land those jobs with big name companies?
That's a good question. Man, it's a little bit of luck, but a lot of work. So I definitely, if I saw a job opening I liked, I did everything in my power to try to get that job. So I would obviously apply first thing. I would try to figure out who's in charge of hiring for this job. So like, who's the HR team in charge of that position? Try to find them on LinkedIn, send them a message, try to connect with them. If that doesn't work, then if you can, try to find a physical address, send a letter, typical old school handwritten letter, could get you really far, right? Mostly in automotive, it's definitely about who you know. So it is a very tight-knit community, but if you can get in, if you can squeeze in, then the doors start opening up pretty regularly. So yeah, definitely just try all the different avenues. If you find like the head of design at, let's just say Chevrolet, for example, and you want to be, they have an opening for the sports car team or whatever, concept team, find a designer who works at Chevrolet on Instagram or something, try to hit them up. Now, are you going to get everyone to reply? No, you're going to get ghosted a lot, and that's totally fine. But you got to plant your seeds and one of them will grow.
So there you go.
You got any more?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So when it comes to the exterior car design, what about the rims? I mean, is that designed along with the car, or is that like, oh, that only comes in when you're doing like the 1 foot rule?
Yeah, that's usually that's later on. So that's like when you're designing the tail lights, the side mirrors, people hop on rims. That's usually later in the design process, because that itself, it's essentially you follow the same process every single time. So like, for example, you do the 100, the 10, the 1 for the exterior of the car, right? Then when you hop on rims, which is later on in the process, you do the same thing. You start off really, really loose. Then you go into more details, and then you go into more details, and then you go into more details. It's the same process over and over and over again, but
So
usually the rims are done later.
So it's like separate. It's not, because I see something like the rough sketches, they have rims on them.
Yeah.
A semblance of the rim. Wait, so it's like the rim design is separate, completely separate from the car body design. Is that what you're saying?
No. What I'm saying is that it's in context, but it's designed separately. So what I'm saying is that you do your sketches of your rims, and then you have like your like money shot of the side view, and you push and you put essentially what we did in my job. So we have like the side view of the car, right? Then we have like 20 different images, and it's just all different rims. And then we pick, okay, this rim looks the best, let's go with this one. Then we usually pick like 3 rims. So you have like your concept rim, which is like your one that's going to be the most showy, but obviously the most difficult to manufacture, but it looks the coolest. Then you have like your sports rim, and then you have like your typical, like your standard rim.
Okay.
And that's usually what happens in car design. And that's why when you go to pick your car, you can choose the rims. It's because they've already designed, a plethora of rims, and those are the ones that they chose as like their premium entry and, high end.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. We probably have time maybe for one more question we can squeeze in. Anybody, any last takers here?
Now's your chance. Let me know. I got answers.
Rick, you had a fantastic presentation. Really loved it. Really enjoyed it. Great meeting you. I'll ask a last question here. What is a car designer driving nowadays?
I have a Tesla Model 3.
There you go.
Yeah, I love that interior, man. That interior is the truth.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, great. So everyone
Okay,
has
I'm gonna ask one more question.
Oh, we have a
Yeah,
question.
please.
So I remember, so I'm a professor, so I received a kind of like some presentation about like maybe 20 years ago when I was undergrad about car design. And it was very interesting that you also mentioned that still the design is like, you're designing for like each car design takes like 5 years approximately. It's still kind of like a question for me. How can you think 5 years ahead for the style, for the, are you driving the style and test, or the study of the user and predicting what the society would like 5 years ahead?
Yes, so this is why concept cars exist, because concept cars are essentially unrealistic, right, at the time, but concept cars are used to show the public what the future could be, right? And when you show the concept car, you start to understand what people like, what people don't like. And also you start to, it gives the suppliers, because at the end of the day, not everything is designed in-house. We have suppliers that, we have a company that builds the instrument panel for us, right? We send them the drawings and things like that, but they build it. And using they have like their components, like they have their AC components and all the things that go inside behind the scenes. So the concept car also shows suppliers what it is that designers want to achieve in the future. And then those suppliers can go, okay, cool. Now we have, for example, my Model 3 interior. Now we have like the Dyson fan blade AC, right? That was never happened before. But somewhere along the line, someone designed it in the concept car and said, hey, we want this really cool thin vents. And then the supplier said, okay, cool, now we can make it happen. And then boom, we bring it into production, right? So a lot of the times the concept cars are used to showcase what the designers are thinking for the future. You get feedback on that. And then when you're looking at it from a brand new vehicle and trying to understand 5 years into the future, you essentially kind of do like a benchmarking exercise. We look at like, okay, here's what Bentley did. Here's what Mercedes is doing. Here's what Audi's doing. And we look at kind of like what their vision of the future is. And we get an understanding of kind of where it's going. And then we think, okay, well, how do we want to do it?
So it's a combination of both, basically. Like you get the feedback from the user, but also bring some new possibility. Do you think the future, this process can be shorter than 5 years? Like,
yes.
Or the industry doesn't want it to be shorter than 5 years. What is?
I think it'll get faster. I think, man, at SF Motors, we were trying to push a car out in like 3 years, which was unbelievable. I learned an insane amount in a short period of time. But I think it will become faster in the fact that once we have the modular platform, the modular EV platform that you can just change the wheelbase, change the track, and now you have a whole different vehicle, that is going to be huge. Because right now, all those platforms, the package, going back to the package of the engine, the wheels and the suspension, all that is different on every car. And so it takes time for them to develop that. Then you design on top of that, and that comes out. And then they do a different one for like a truck, right? And things like this. But once we have the modular platform, that's going to be a game changer for sure. Because then you're just adjusting the mold and it's popping out platforms, boom. And then you just grab your design and put it on top. I think that's going to be a huge game changer when that happens, whoever can crack the code first. And also the ability to now use VR, which we used heavily in my last job. And VR was a lot faster in the beginning process to understand what the car is going to look like in full scale. Because to get to a clay, it takes time. And the clay is a great tool. It will not go away. The clay is still used heavily. But before the clay, you can get to the VR really quickly, right? And if we use, for example, like Blender tools, if someone does a car, and I'm telling you, I know a guy who did the new Hyundai that just came out. He modeled the whole thing based on just images in 2 days. 2 days, a whole car. That would take, in Alias, that would take at least 1 month straight, just fully focused 1 month. This guy did in 2 days. And now you can go into 3D with VR. That's impressive, right? And now the other thing about it is now you can marry VR with clay. So when I put the goggles on and I overlaid over the clay model, you can now change the color, right? You can touch it and you can feel what it's going to look like and see what it's going to look like. and you can change the color, you can change the lights, you can change the rims. All this can be done at the same time, like live. And that could never be done at that fast before. So I think it is going to get faster. And yeah, the whole 5-year thing, it might be cut down sooner than you think.
And can the clay also be automated to make it faster?
Yeah, so the clay is a lot faster now because now we have CNCs, 5-axis CNCs, and literally they're coming in, you throw in your model, they take it to the CNC machine, it cuts it all up. It even has different paths. So you have, it gets finer and finer with every cut. And then the clay modelers come in and they do the fine tuning, right? So it's already a lot faster than it used to be. And the other thing is, what they do to speed up the process is they'll split the car in half. So like one half will have side design A and the other half will have design B. And so that helps speed up the process because you can see 2 different designs on one model.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, you're on mute, Elliot.
Thank you. I have one question from Mike Wynn. He's asking, if you were to design anything other than cars, what do you think that would be?
Really cool to wish design. If I didn't design cars, man, I have never thought of that. That is a really good question. You kind of stumped me on that one. I really like just like houseware stuff. Like I love furniture, housewares. I think I'm very particular on what I buy for my own house because I need everything to just be designed awesome, and everything looks proper. And I think I would probably be doing furniture or houseware stuff. I also just love like natural materials like wood, metal, fabrics, just like, I try to shy away from plastics.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's great. And maybe that question speaks to how focused you are on automotive design and how much you love that industry. So that's great. And it shows, your presentation shows. So again, appreciate your time, Rick, and everyone who was able to join. All the contact information is up there. And this is a recording, so you'll be able to watch it in the future if you want to review it on the IDSA HTX YouTube. So please subscribe there, and yeah, contact Rick with any other questions that you might have.
I want to just add to that, and I'm very serious when I say please contact me. I've mentioned this to students in the past, and I've had maybe 1 or 2 hit me up and ask for feedback, and I try to help as much as I can. I try to make myself readily available for students because I didn't have that when I was a student, right? So please take advantage of having me and having my insight to help you with your project. By any means, please shoot me a message, email, however you can reach me, and I'll try to get to you as fast as I can.
Love it, Rick. Awesome. Take advantage of that, guys. That's gold. Okay, all right, Mariana, if we could go ahead and start the closeout process for this.